and doctor is here, so that makes me my excitement even more. Thank you for joining in, doctor. We are so very glad to have Dr. Sailesh Srikhande with us today. He is the Deputy Director, Professor and Head, Cancer Surgery, Tata Memorial Hospital, and a philanthropist. He is also the trustee of Cricketers Foundation. He has been invited visiting professor to leading medical institutions such as Weill Cornell in New York. Oh, did I just cover myself? In New York, Karolinska Institute in Sweden, Medicine University of Belgrade, and Tokyo Women's University, Japan. Apart from this, he's done 54 live operative demonstrations, 24 keynote lectures and orations, invited to 560 lectures worldwide, 73 invited book chapters, 246 scientific publications. H index is 34, which is highest in Tata Memorial and amongst peers across India. He's serving on the editorial board of leading international journals, and I can go on and on, but I think I should stop on here, and I would want you to see him, meet him, and understand where this aura and all of this energy and all that he's doing comes from. I was extremely, awed actually. Impressed would be an understatement. Awed by the 500 surgeries that I got to know were done in the last 2 months. Dr. Sailesh, welcome and thank you so much for joining in. I cannot tell you how happy I am to have you here on this platform. And I don't want to bombard you with questions, but really I'm very curious to know that, what is it that, helps you manage all of this and the 500 surgeries that you did during COVID, and what keeps you focused and so active? Like, I just can't hold myself from asking you that even before we begin. So over to you, Dr. Sailesh.
Thank you very much for the kind, slightly embarrassingly long introduction. A real pleasure and privilege to be with all of you this evening. Your question is, I think, focused straight on the fact that we have done a lot of surgeries, more than the numbers. I think some of you might have seen it in the newspapers that we did in the initial 5 weeks of the lockdown from 23rd of March to the end of April. We did about 494 operations in those 5 weeks. So if you want to be even more inspired or get to hear good news, which is very difficult in this year, in the month of May, after this 5-week period, and in the month of June, and mind you, we are on the 10th of July, we have only increased our work. So you can be safely assured that we've done about approximately 1,500 operations already for cancer care during this time when most of the world is struggling with their healthcare systems thanks to COVID. So yes, I think what keeps us going, the answer is very simple. I think we first chose to be doctors because we somewhere enjoy working and being able to use our expertise for the benefit of those who really come to us in their darkest hour or in their hour of need. Unfortunately, my profession is such that not too many people come in contact with me unless they fall ill, which is so sad in one way. But on the other hand, we are privileged to get the chance to treat them. Now, what happens is, thanks to being doctors, despite the lot of confusion that exists worldwide, even in the medical world, about how COVID exists, I think we have been able to understand that only 3 things truly matter. And the 3 things that you all must have heard, but they are very difficult to implement. And the 3 things that really matter is masks, social distancing, and making sure that hand hygiene is of the best quality and consistently done with great military discipline. If you do these 3 things, chances are that you will be safe as long as you are not living in an extremely crowded environment. If you are living in one small room like it's in a slum, It's very understandable and it's very depressing. There is no question. But otherwise, one needn't worry. So how do I answer your question? We were aware of this, that this is ongoing, but Tata Memorial Hospital, the oldest and the largest cancer hospital in this part of the world, and clearly one of the busiest hospitals worldwide. We know that the number of patients that who come to us seeking care for cancer are also coming even when there is no problem of COVID for them. So the answer was easy for us, that either you turn them down and you say there is a worldwide pandemic, and we're very sorry, please go back, we can't help you. So now these poor patients, and when I say poor, I mean private patients who are moneyed as well as patients who really can't afford financially. These patients are left with no choice but to bear the burden of two hanging swords. One is that of corona, and the second is that of cancer. So we chose that if we can work out a system where we can segregate patients well, we can filter out patients well, we would yet be able to continue offering routine cancer surgeries which patients need, and not just surgeries, also chemotherapy, radiotherapy, so on and so forth. So yes, it was a question of working around our workforce, being well informed, working with a lot of discipline. Tata Memorial is special for the kind of service culture that it enjoys over the years, and I'm very fortunate to be here in this institution for the last nearly 20 years now. So I think one thing that separates this hospital from any other hospital in the world, and I travel all over the world, is the work ethic and the selfless work culture. We are certainly overwhelmed by a lot of people and a lot of patients. Like most things in India, you know how a local train is. You can't improve Mumbai's local train services over and above what the work they are doing. To some extent, sometimes Tata is overwhelmed and we are victims of our own success. We need to make sure that we need not only new Tata Memorial across the country, but we also need the same work culture so that patients start coming less here. Now, during this lockdown, we got too many patients who were already in Mumbai. They had arrived from elsewhere. For those of you who might have read in some details, more than 60% of patients were from out of Mumbai and outside the state of Maharashtra. So only 36% patients were from Mumbai and from the state of Maharashtra. So it was more easier to organize surgeries for these 36% patients. But for the remaining 64% patients, we decided that yes, we must offer them surgery either because of their appointments taken before, and if they are low risk for getting corona, if they don't have, if they are not very old, if they don't have diabetes, if they don't have blood pressure. We did operate amongst these 494, 64 patients who were more than 60 with complications and other comorbidities as well. But we also chose a large number of patients who were the younger, healthier people in terms of risk of corona, but nevertheless had cancers, where treatment delay in cancer was going to cost them their life. Just the way the financial world today is faced with a big challenge, that on one hand, because of corona, everybody is supposed to be staying at home, but finally people are going to say that I need to do something for a living to get some food, otherwise I'm going to die, not with corona, but with other factors. The same thing was applicable to us when we took a conscious decision that, knowing the pandemic trends in India, we can certainly continue operating 50% of our capacity. Teams got together, and it's not about me, it's not about the doctors only. The entire group of people who are involved in running a high quality hospital, right from the Aya, the ward boys, the back office people, the billing sections, everyone. We had 22 buses making 66 buses visits for our employees, so that during lockdown they could all come and they could be on duty. We also made sure that there was a rotation of people to try and keep them healthy, so everyone was not coming to work every day. We did make flexi work hours, which is not easy for a government institution, but these are times where it was easily possible for us. We are under the Department of Atomic Energy, and we have great freedom in doing a lot of things. And I think we used it responsibly. So we could do 50% then in the month of May, we are 60%. In the month of June, we are 70%. And here we are. So I'm sorry I gave you a long answer, but I think the answer involves the whole picture that you need to understand. And then what you get to see finally in the media is that we did close to 500 operations in 5 weeks.
Doctor, can I ask you a question?
Sure, please.
Doctor, cancer in mindset and cancer physically carrying. How do you actually, drive, motivate, and treat a patient?
Yeah, so, I think it's very important for people to understand that you really cannot separate the mind from the body. As with most things in life, the biggest game that you play is in the mind. If your mind is stable and in control, this is not easy. This is easier said than done, applies to me, applies to you, applies to everyone in this world. That if mind is in control and steady, we have consistently observed without knowing the mechanisms as to how it exactly works. But we've consistently observed that big health problems become easier to manage, or more complex cancers, patients tend to do much better than those where the mind is not in control, and there, even early stage cancers tend to worsen. So I think an important role for a doctor or a surgeon like me is not only to assess what kind of a CT scan is there and what kind of a biopsy report is there. I always tell my patients that I'm not treating your reports, I'm treating a human being. And God is so great that there are no two human beings which are the same on planet Earth. So every single time, there are no two cancers which are actually identical. They are always different. So we need to understand their psychology. We need to understand their mindset. We need to understand from what kind of a background they are coming. We need to understand what kind of stresses are they likely to be facing prior to their reaching my office, and what kind of stresses they are likely to face while undergoing treatment with us. And then we need to tailor how we counsel them, how we talk to them, and the kind of treatment that we offer to them. So I think this goes hand in hand, and this is not a mechanical job. No way. I don't think medicine is an art. Surgery is also an art. And they always say that the more we always say that you treat the tissues with respect, you enjoy what nature and God has given us. So I think once you do that, things are.
So I have a question. I'm Dr. Neeta Mhatre here.
Good evening.
Good evening, doctor. So with all due respects to our profession, and I would just like to add, I'm a wife of a cancer survivor, and I understand a role of a caregiver. So, it becomes, it's not the cancer which is a problem, to be very frank. It is always the mindset, and secondly, the drugs, the chemotherapy drugs, which is so dreaded and which is so dreadful. I feel somewhere around the thing, if the doctors will start talking about how does the medicine play a role, how does the chemotherapy plays a role, even to the caregivers, it gives a lot of mental stability, because the treatment itself is a very unstable treatment. You cannot assure that you start a chemotherapy on day 1 and all these cycles will be over by 6 or 7 months, because you never know how is the patient going to respond. So I think somewhere down the line, the caregivers have to really be made very, very strong. And the caregivers also should be given that thing, during these conditions, how are you going to look after your own patient? So I think that certainly has to be done into the system now.
Yeah, so I think I couldn't agree more with you. What you are trying to essentially say is that the amount of time spent by one individual doctor with an individual patient, and it's not just time in terms of just the quantity of time, we are talking about the quality of time. And
quality time, yes.
So, as they say, what separates the men from the boys is to make sure that attention to detail to the smallest of things. And I always tell this to myself when I operate. Whenever I'm operating, actually, I just ask myself, if this particular patient who has given me his or her life to manage and operate, imagine this patient being my father, brother, mother, sister. Whatever I would do for them, this is what I need to do today. I'm as good as my last operation. And the game doesn't begin and end with an operation. It begins from the time they come to my clinic, and it also ends with their quality of life being maintained long after they have gone home after a successful operation. So it's a whole spectrum of things. And if I choose to be the captain of the ship, I need to also make sure that everybody else who is involved in the continuum of care is able to do that. Of course, there are challenges in this country simply because the doctor-patient ratio is a very abysmal 1:2000. If you look at the United States, it is 1 doctor for 390 patients. Automatically, you will be able to have more time at your disposal. The same issue with our nursing ratios. So in this country, the ratios are extremely skewed, and that also puts an abnormal amount of pressure on our doctors. On one hand, the doctor's ability to quickly come to the point is almost at a spinal level because we are trained so much to deal with large volume of patients. But on the other hand, the compromise is that if you are going to be having a busy clinic from 6 o'clock in the evening to 9 o'clock at night with 20 patients, how much time will you give to every patient? And this is where people need to strike a balance. And I've seen I've been very fortunate to have grown up in a family of doctors. I've seen the way my father has consulted patients and given time. One of the foremost GI surgeons of the country, he's a young 90-year-old just now. But when it came to history taking, when it came to the human touch, when it came to the amount of time that he spent, you always realize that it is the small things that make all the big difference. Beyond your surgical skills and your intelligence, it's a question of your emotional quotient, your personal involvement. Without getting emotional, you stay scientific, but yet you deliver. If you're consciously aware of this, you will be a busy man, but you will be a satisfied person at the end of the day.
Thank you so much,
Shailesh,
Doctor. And I was so excited listening to Doctor. I was anyways feeling that am I even, I'm so small to even say that, wow, what a good thing, because of all these noble things that happen, and we just get to see and admire it. And we only hope that we can add some value to it. Having said that, you introduced yourself and you said that I only meet, people when they are sick. But today you get to meet so many of us in a happy and a healthy state, right? So please tell us something that we can do in our lifestyles to bring in more immunity for ourselves, whether it is against cancer or COVID or anything. Make ourselves strong enough, immune enough that we meet doctors in such forums more often than in hospitals. So what would you say?
So I think I'll begin with the simple answer that, just now when you are in peacetime, and you all are, and so am I, though I'm working here, we are all in peacetime. And I think the best thing is to sweat it out in peacetime, because this is again something which is highly useful in my day-to-day life when I do complex cancer surgeries. I've ended up choosing some of the most complex cancer surgeries. I chose them by my own choice, and now I'm stuck with it, but quite happily. So unless you sweat in peacetime, you will bleed in wartime, is what I tell myself all the time. So now when it comes to preventing cancer or trying to face a pandemic or cancer, I think we all need to understand that our body experiences a cancer cell developing in our body every single day for the whole of our life. But your defense system, your immune system, your innate immunity is good enough to throw out these bad abnormal cancer cells, and the body wins over, and you don't even realize that your body has been under threat every day. On the other hand, I also say that a degree of discomfort in every single aspect in life is actually good. A degree of discomfort will actually keep you fitter and healthier. I don't mean to say that you need to, you shouldn't lead too sterile a life as well, because then your body is just not capable of handling any sort of insult. I can give you a simple example. I enjoy a shower or a bath with nice hot water, but I'm just 49. And when I know that my dad can still take a shower with cold water, even in winter at the age of 90, then you realize that you need to push your body a little bit differently. So the basic thing is enjoy your life, stay positive. So now I bring mind into the game. You start getting a mind, an empty mind is a devil's workshop. And you all see newspapers, media, meet people. You will always have two choices. There will always be a positive side to life, and there will always be a negative side to life. You always have a choice in life. You can choose what to read and what not to read. You want to read how Dubey was killed and why was he killed and how bad is the world of politics and gangsters and police, etc. That's one choice. Your other choice is to read excellent other news that also is circulating around in the world. So your mind needs to be trained to be positive. So that's one thing. A positive mind will also impact your immunity enormously. So it's a health talk that I'm giving you, not a philosophical talk. The second bit is a life of moderation is fine. So, we all have our likes and dislikes and cheat days and, the drink and the fast food and the holidays. Why not? This is all absolutely fine. Human beings, we are not all working with military regimentation, and we are not working in some dictatorship. So we must enjoy our lives. But everything in moderation. I always say, if you lead a life of moderation, the chances are that something like cancer is an extremely uncommon event. That means only when we abuse our mind or our bodies by taking things for granted, that's when we start to pay a price for it. Please understand that things like hypertension and diabetes are diseases of the modern civilization. And they have dramatically, why should India become the diabetes capital of the world? It's easy to blame it on genes. You also need to understand that if you don't exercise, if you take a food or diet which is very rich in the wrong kind of fats and energies, you're just causing havoc with your metabolism. And if you don't exercise, you will invite things like diabetes. Easier said than done. Try exercising 5-6 times a week with consistency because you respect your body. You do that, lead a life of moderation, you will not get these diseases. So if someone comes to Tata Memorial, you will feel that the whole world is falling sick. But when you step out of Tata Memorial, you realize that most of the world doesn't fall sick. You just need to take a little bit of care and you will be fine. So I'm not one of those who says, do that. The clear bad thing is tobacco. I think there is no benefit of tobacco in any form. I won't say the same about alcohol. A little bit of alcohol can even have beneficial effects, and we can keep on discussing for years together whether it's harmful or beneficial. But I enjoy an occasional drink, and this is absolutely and it has beneficial effects. But just a balanced diet, regular exercise, a life of moderation, and some degree of hardships is essential. That will keep you in much better health than anything else.
Wow. I was listening.
Okay, now I can hear you. Sorry, I thought I lost you.
I got so scared. But I'll tell you, doctor, I am a living testimony of what you just said. I am 41 and my parents are now 70 and 73 and all. And none of us have no hypertension, no nothing. Like, and I always believe that nothing will happen to us because we have good immunity system. Because we don't stress too much over things which are not in our control. We try to just, keep working and doing the best of what we can. And really it has helped. So everything that you were saying was really inspirational. And one thing I'm going to take from you is I am going to dedicatedly exercise 5 days a week, for which I'm a little lazy. I just do it twice, thrice, and I feel like I'm done. So thank you for all those tips that you gave. And eating in moderation, yes, I think we all need to do that. And that's how it shows how fit you are and why you're so fit.
I can interrupt there that I think vast majority of us, including me, we always tend to eat more than what we need. And most of us would be on the overweight side. And I think that's where we need to take care, especially when you cross 35 to 40 years, it starts to bother your body more than anything else. So I think,
Right.
A little bit more discipline post 35 is likely to help us all
Right.
as we go along. Yeah.
Great. We'll keep that in mind, doctor. And I hope that all of us now have more healthy stuff to share and talk about.
Yeah.
Coming to a little about talking about progress in our health, I would also want to mention and ask you about the progress that our country is seeing, and especially the kind of work that Tata Memorial is doing. So what I hear is the expansion plans, which are going to be absolute evolution for this country. I would really love for you to share with us what is that plan and the project that is in store for us.
Yeah, so I think one good thing about Tata Memorial is that it has been a trendsetter as far as cancer care is concerned in this part of the world and in India. Unfortunately, over a period of time, we have realized that, as I mentioned at the beginning, we are also victims of our success. One shouldn't be too proud that we get patients from all over the country to come and see us, travel from the northeastern parts of India, from northern India, from all over the place. As I said, about 61% of people are coming from outside the state of Maharashtra seeking treatment for cancer care, which admittedly, it can be quite an experience and quite tiring and mentally exhausting to be in Tata. But finally, the decision or the plan which is made for a patient is truly world class. This I can tell you, not because I want to speak good about Tata or anything like that. It's truly world class. So I think that kind of trust has resulted in people bearing all these hardships, but simultaneously, people perhaps are not either getting access to healthcare in their area, or they do not trust the quality of healthcare or the people managing healthcare in the regions where they stay. And then the trust has continued to grow in a place like Tata. So on one hand, we can rest on our laurels and say that we get patients from all over the country, and I have a wait list of 6 weeks where people have to wait to get surgery. The other way is to say that in an ideal world, a doctor close to home is the best doctor. And in that scenario, for a country of 130 crores, we need to have more hospitals. Now, what have we tried to do? I must also give you the feedback that 55 to 60% of the skilled cancer workforce in this country is trained by my institution. So we are a deemed university. And when it comes to qualifying surgeons, radiation oncologists, medical oncologists, etc., for every cancer specialist that you see in the country, for 100 that you see, 60 of them nearly would be trained in this place. So this is clearly the cradle. This is the school for cancer service, research, and education. So we need to grow. That's point number one. The governments have been favorable to us. We do not come under the Ministry of Health. We come under the Department of Atomic Energy. And the previous government has given us 5 acres of land just across the hospital where I currently am. And that's on the Hafkin area where we've got 5 acres of land. And we've got 3 buildings coming up. The first one should be ready by the end of October. And this is only to take care of in-house doctors and nurses to give them better accommodation, because the number of people have increased, but the place to accommodate them comfortably hasn't increased. So what we are doing is a 208 bed hostel with much better living conditions and facilities for our own doctors. Because I also believe what Vineet Nair, who's a friend of mine, who was with HCL Technologies and the CEO who turned around HCL Technologies, that it's also employees first and customers second. That's the other way to look at it as well. So I think we are looking at that. But then in that place, I've been made the project in charge, and I've been working on this for the last 3 years, that we'll be building a 550 bed cancer hospital, which is actually not going to be for my lifetime. I would want that this becomes the flagship for cancer care for the next 40 to 50 years. And the highlight of that place, I don't know how many of you all are aware, but the great part of Tata Memorial is that 60% of patients treatment at highly subsidized rates, and 40% of beds and treatment is for patients who can be the private class of patients, semi-private, private, deluxe, whatever. So we want to give a very uniform patient experience to every single individual who will visit our hospital. That's been the goal of Tata Memorial. I work for a salary. I don't work on a patient-to-patient basis, but I'm very proud that 60% of our work is for free and 40% is, and both of them get the same standards of care. But in this new hospital, we will segregate things so well because Tata has had one drawback. A number of private patients would view this hospital as a general hospital, and a number of general patients are going to view this hospital as a private hospital. So there has been this confusion in the minds of people. So we will be designing a hospital where there is a central core, where the team of doctors and certain facilities would be, and there would be 2 dedicated wings. Perhaps one of the next times that we meet, I'll be able to share the designs, etc. with you. That a patient coming to the private side will be only in a private hospital. A patient coming to the government side will only be in a government hospital. So that's going to be the big step in the next 3 to 4 years. We hopefully will start construction towards the end of this year. The designs are done. We've got a joint venture from an American architect as well as an Indian company. The designs are nearly final now, and we are floating tender, and we'll hopefully get an excellent contractor to build the hospital in the next 3 years. That's as far as Tata Memorial in Mumbai is concerned. But in the meanwhile, we've already got a 350-bedded hospital in Varanasi. It's one of the hotspots as far as cancer is concerned in Uttar Pradesh. So we've got there another Tata Memorial Hospital, which was inaugurated by Mr. Modi last year, our Prime Minister. We've got another hospital in Vizag, and we've started services over there. It's not full-fledged as yet, but we have a director in place, we have doctors in place, a lot of chemotherapy is in place, and some surgeries have already started there as well. Then in Guwahati, we always had a cancer hospital known as B. Barua Cancer Institute, BBCI, and the Tata Memorial team and the DAE has taken over that hospital as well. We want that to be a nodal center for the Northeastern Council state. If we can develop centers of excellence in a place like Guwahati, in Vizag, in Varanasi, and then in Mumbai, as well as in ACTREC. ACTREC is Advanced Center for Training, Research and Education in Cancer in Kharghar. That's about 42 kilometers from where I am just now. But there you will see an enhanced ability where we'll have about 900 beds in the next 2 years or so. So Tata today is 560 beds, but you can easily expect about 2,000 beds in Mumbai for cancer care, exclusive cancer care in the next 3 to 4 years. That's the way we are looking here. And the other area is, of course, you identify which are the commoner cancers, which require more standard forms of treatment so that people can access our other centers rather than coming here. We are always connected with them, and we are all aware now how telemedicine is going to come up in an even bigger way, thanks to Corona, that we can always consult, people need not travel. At the same time, there would be some cancers which require highly specialized care. And these specialized care can't be given in the smaller centers. They will still have to keep coming by. For example, there are specialized pediatric cancers. There are cancers in my specialty like pancreatic cancer surgery, etc., which require multidisciplinary care, highly complex operations. And for that, we are going on a capacity expansion right here in Mumbai. We're also doing one more thing, and this is because of our commitment to society, not because we are expected to do it, but we have chosen to do it. I told you that on the Hafkin plot, we are doing 3 buildings. So the first one is for the residents and nurses. The second one will be an identical one, and that will be a dharamshala. And this is only for patients' relatives. You know, everyone feels bad about people being on the platforms and people being under bridges and people being Tata. It's actually not because they are homeless, but because they want treatment in Tata Memorial. And there are some cancers where they need to stay in Mumbai for 2, 3, 4 months. So what we will try to do, our bit is again have 200 studio apartment kind of a concept. There are 200 families who are going to be long duration. We can help them. So you asked me one question, what can you do to kind of help us in your own way? I think the biggest challenge for people when they come to Mumbai, you don't need to really look after their medical care per se, but all the things that go around supporting a cancer patient, accommodation, where to go. People are struggling to get basic information. We do a lot. We have NGOs, we have medical social workers, we have a lot, but still one can do a lot more to make them more comfortable. So that's one area where we would expect society to participate more actively, and that would help.
Wow, like this is going to take India to another level when it comes to medical facilities. You know, already when I have traveled abroad, I have always heard that, you know, people consider India to be one of the greatest hubs for medical. And now with this, I think it's going to take another level altogether. So, I mean,
the desire is very clearly there, and I think you must always aim for the sky. You must not aim for anything lesser in life. And we will see. I think when you have the right energies, the universe conspires. So we will see.
Absolutely. I'm so proud to be hearing this, and thank you so much for sharing that, and thank you so much for being a part of this entire thing, and being able to talk to you and hearing it from you is really a privilege, sir. Thank you so much. Now I want to deviate a little from this topic, and I just want to understand that, you know, a person like you who is so much completely into your medical profession, doing so many things that are going to help progress, helping people, everything. But I still know that you have a very deep and a compulsory hobby, which is cricket. So how do you balance and you know, I don't know, I want to learn it from you. How do you balance and you maintain your hobby also in such a beautiful way, at the same time 20 hours of work, sometimes 18 hours of work? Like, how do you, are you a superman? How do you do that?
No, to be very honest, this is wrong. What you are talking is all sounding like an ego boost, but I don't need that. I think the honest answer is that I did play a lot of cricket in my young days. I did play for Mumbai under 15 and under 17 in the 80s. So it's true that I played with some of the very well-known stars that you all know very well. So I played a fair bit of cricket with Sachin Tendulkar, with Vinod Kambli, with Praveen Amre, and some of them are still very good acquaintances and friends. So yes, I think Mumbai's cricket culture was something which is unique. Even today, it's gone down a lot compared to what it was in the 70s and 80s and 90s. Mumbai is a very different city now than what it was in the 80s in terms of the cricketing sporting culture. But I think I've seen some of the best days of Mumbai cricket in the 80s. So naturally, I took the game like a fish to water. So this was fine. And then when it came to medical school, sometime around 1992, I'm already just 21 years of age. Cricket was already out of my life. And the job of becoming a doctor, then an intern, then becoming a surgeon, and developing a career and a life, it took up, before I could realize, 20 fantastic years on one hand. But I have had, believe it or not, from 1992 to 2012, I have had zero connection with cricket. So, yeah, zero connection. Yeah, the occasional match, the occasional interest, yes. But I've really not been passionate about cricket in those years. I was passionate when I was playing cricket on my own. So I'm not just a fanatic who will just go for every cricket match and watch. Yes, I would see something which is excellent and super once in a while, but admittedly, 90%, if not more than 90%, has gone into giving my best to my chosen profession. So, and I have no regrets. I think that's the reason some of the things that you read out while introducing me, That happens because the heart, soul, mind, body, everything has been put into gastrointestinal, pancreatic cancer surgery, doing basic research, doing my degrees, spending my time abroad in Switzerland, Germany, doing the works and being in love with it. So I don't think it was bad hard work. It was hard work, which was very enjoyable. And then, you know, what happens in 2012, we had young doctors in Tata saying that they wanted to play a fun match, a fun game against the older consultants who are now 42. So I said, what am I doing? Have you organized the beer and the food, etc.? And we will play something and we'll have some fun and then, but get the beer organized was the thought process. The end result was, because I've played before, when I actually went and played just the second match out of fun, I ended up playing quite well to my own amazement. And that's when you suddenly realize that, oh, you can still do this thing and you can do this quite well and you can take on the younger guys as well. So what started off as a fun event to keep myself entertained and, you know, just be on the ground, smell the fresh air and be on a nice ground and feel good, quickly turned into rediscovering my passion. So came the new cricket kit. I had discarded all my kits by 92. So came the new technology, bats, came everything. But the best part was to visit my cricket coach, who is now 91 years of age.
Wow.
Yeah, Shri Hemant Hadkar. And I did see another colleague of mine, another childhood friend of mine, Amit Gadkari, is there on this group. So we have played cricket. We are childhood friends. And we started cricket together. Myself, Amit Gadkari, a guy you might be knowing, Jatin Paranspe, who's the chairman of, who's the selector for the Indian cricket team now. So myself, Jatin and Amit started playing together in the 1980s, 81 to be precise, with Mr. Hadkar. So in 2014 or 15, I went back to him, and amazingly, he was still very much there. Still there at 6:30 in the morning, training the young kids with the same discipline. Nothing, just a simple man who has led his life comfortably, very contented soul, very calm, and superbly. So again, you know, what you now have is that you don't have the physical ability which you had when you are 20 as compared to 44, but you are perhaps a little bit wiser and more mature. And I restarted playing the game in all seriousness, and it has yielded fairly good results. So that's how the love with cricket was kind of rediscovered in its full energy. And then there was the Tata Hospital employees cricket team. So these are employees in Tata Hospital, class 3, class 4 workers. And I didn't even know that Tata had a team all along. And I have great regrets that I've been in this place for the last 19 years. But I started playing for the Tata team only in the last 4 years. I could have played much better had I played with them 10 years ago. But then came the desire to also be converting this cricketing experience into an education. So exactly 3 years ago, I took a cricket team, not just of doctors. The doctors paid on their own, like-minded guys who have been playing. We paid money on our own, but we also organized funds from well-wishers and others so that we could take 5 or 6 employees. All of them never had a passport. Most of them had never sat in an aeroplane. And I took them for a 9-day trip to England to play on some nice, pretty grounds and play against some clubs and hospitals. So we did that very well in 2017. And then again in 2018, I took them to South Africa. Of course, I went there for the love of cricket. But I said, when I'm in Tata, it can't be just about doctors. You need to be taking care of the people who are with you, who anyway play. So I think that's been enormously gratifying. It's an education, it's about camaraderie, it's about teamwork, and it's about cricket, and it's about fitness. So these are terrific holidays. We were all set to board the plane for Australia in March. Thank God we didn't, otherwise we would have been quarantined over there. So the Australian tour has been wrecked this year, but hopefully we'll be back with cricket soon. So that's my personal journey with cricket for the question that you asked me. And how do I find time? I find time about 40 minutes to an hour in the morning before my day begins. So I think I try to give 1 to 1.5 hours, which is exclusively my time, because once I step out and once I go to the hospital, the time is not under my control. I think we all have watches, but we have no control over our time, not at all. So I think if I do that in the morning, it takes care of the health. It also releases the nice endorphins in the brain. You do something what is not just surgery and your job as a doctor and patient care, but you do something and then it's good. So I try to find time. And I get invited for lectures everywhere. Now, not this year, nothing at all. But otherwise, I do travel a lot. But I accept invites for lectures on weekends many a times, but in the monsoon, because in monsoon, there is no cricket. Once it is time towards end of September, I tell them that either I lecture on a Friday evening or on a Saturday, because I need to be home by Saturday so that I can play a match on a Sunday. That's how I managed to find time.
Oh, wow. I mean, that's so organized and, disciplined, even in keeping your hobby and your profession going side by side.
Yeah, we all have 24 hours and we all have one lifetime. We just have to be grateful for what we have and just utilize it well as much as we can.
Absolutely. And I think that is one of the secrets of your complete focus whether you're doing 500 surgeries on anything, because you know how to take those interim breaks and then, de-stress and then come back and get into the grind.
You need to recharge. You need humor. You need human beings. You need family. You need, some social structure which can keep you grounded. I'm very fortunate to have a terrific family, some great friends. Some of them are here. I can see them. I can see Raj Batham over here. I see Mr. B.P. Mangal. So I can see some of them and they are very good friends. So it's lovely to always keep in touch with everyone, stay grounded, and then stay focused and recharge your batteries.
Absolutely. Thank you. That's the greatest takeaway for today. I'm sure for everybody. And just one last thing also I would want to ask you before we take leave from you, that you're into a lot of philanthropy. So what is it that inspires you to, give back or, do what you're doing? What's that inspiration and what are things that you think that you want to keep?
So to be very honest, I can tell you one thing. Aren't we all extremely grateful to life for what we have? Because what you and I have is good health. We have a house to stay. We never have to worry about food. We are talking of some very basic things, and this is what COVID-19 has made the world realize. It's about revisiting the basics and being very grateful to life. Because what you and I have, which we have always taken for granted, and even now in these lockdown days, we have it with us. And that's when I realized that there is no end to being more grateful, because there are vast majority of people in this world who do not have what you and I have. Once you have this sense of gratefulness and something which keeps you completely grounded, that's when you will start realizing that the best happiness is in giving and not in acquiring. We live in an extremely and increasingly acquisitive world. Everyone hello?
Yeah, I think somebody got on.
We certainly enjoy some good things in life, and I'm not saying that one doesn't need money to live. Of course, you need a good standard of life. But beyond that, I think it's important to separate your needs from wants, because you will slowly start differentiating the difference between pleasure and happiness. And I think as a doctor, what I realize over the years, and I continue to learn, and I might even change, but as of now, I realize that giving more and more, this is one specialty where you give more and more without expecting anything in return, actually. But the kind of sleep that I can get at the end of the day for making a difference to somebody's life or somebody's family is quite unparalleled. It is truly, it really works great and wonders on our brain. So I think from there, the thought process comes in that real happiness lies in giving. And now comes to this concept of philanthropy. If you are in a favored situation in life as compared to someone else, I think the biggest happiness we get is to help someone find meaning to their life in whatever way, financial, psychological, in so many different ways. And that's what cricket has also done. That we are all aware of the stars and the mega stars, but are we aware of the people who made these mega stars? Are we aware of the common man who is still there at Shivaji Park and Azad Maidan and Cross Maidan? This is the cradle of Mumbai cricket. Right from Sunil Gavaskar, today is his birthday, and clearly today is Sunil Gavaskar's birthday, but clearly my number one god, if you ask me, in the world of cricket. The rest of India stands on the shoulders of this man, but we will discuss that some other time. The important thing is, right from him, the best of Bombay cricketers, and even before him, they have all come up from all these grounds. But who maintains these grounds? What happens to the family of these groundsmen? Where do their children stay in those little huts by the side of the ground? Where do they go for just a routine bath in the morning? Who looks after the ordinary umpire and not the elite panel of umpires? Who is that scorer who's sitting in that little tent, who has no technology? Now it's there, the smartphones are there, but who's making a neat note of all the cricketing ongoings? As they say that if you really want to learn, you need to understand how to maintain a good scorebook. And myself and my friends have done this, but we were the fortunate kids who had a home, who had a family, who had education, who would go there on the ground and play and then get home and then study and go to good colleges. But that's not their life. And these guys have seen all the mega stars from their childhood to where they are today. So then came the idea that we really need to do something to reach out for them. And I think myself and all my other colleagues on Cricketers Foundation, in fact, I'm the one who is perhaps the least active, but I would like to specify that there is Mr. Makaran Waingankar, a real cricket knowledgeable person who's written lots of books, who's a mentor to many cricketers, and his knowledge of cricket is fascinating. He's the one who is the chairman of our foundation. The other gentleman is a dear friend of mine, Amit Gadkari, who is the CEO of Iraswa, which is the jewelry store, but that's not important. His ability to write, study, and understand cricket, apart from the fact that we are childhood friends, so we can talk with each other for hours together and be with each other for hours together. He's the other person on that foundation. Abhijit Sansgiri, who's very much here, I happen to know him for many years, and his passion for the game is also remarkable. So you see, you have someone from the finance world, you have someone like Makaran Waingankar, then you have somebody like Salil Datar, who was a Mumbai cricketer, a top-notch university player, senior to us, and he's actively involved in this foundation. And the four of them, I would say, are taking terrific efforts. Of course, I'm doing my bit to chip in, and we are just a little less than a year old as a foundation, but we are very glad that we are already able to help a number of people through our good offices. And again, I would appeal to everyone who is on this group that if you really feel that you have any sources, any desire to help people who are really in need, then we have this foundation. Obviously, not a single Naya Paisa we are interested in for ourselves. What we are doing is we are receiving funds and then just directly transferring it to the ordinary Mali on the and the umpires in need, or people who have retired and are old and have no health insurance, etc. So that they can make a meaningful difference to their life. I think the worst thing for them would be as they get older, or as they are not any more important in their specialty, that they should get a feeling that it has been a life well led and not a life of depression and questions and worry and reflecting back and thinking, why did I ever do this job? So I think there we are again concerned, and that's how the thought process of philanthropy comes out.
Great. Wow. So you have blended these things so well into each other that, you know, one is your profession, which is noble and which needs all your attention, and it has it. And now cricket, and within cricket also, I mean, I have personally, honestly, never even imagined or thought that, what happens, how the ground is always so clear and how the pitch is always so perfect. I mean, we never think about these things. And I think today what you said is going to, make us actually think about every profession or everything.
Exactly. I think it's about concern, and it's
Yeah.
less about yourself. It's just about concern for every person with whom you interact. And the
Yes.
same applies to my patients. It's always easy to say, oh my God, one more patient, he's troubling me, she's troubling me. Nobody is visiting me in the hospital because they have a desire to trouble me.
True,
They are
true,
coming to me because there is a need. They are in trouble. I need to
true.
be consciously aware of that. We sometimes get lost in our own world and run the risk of becoming too comfortable or too arrogant without realizing. And I think what you said and what you get from what I told you is very important. It's about concern for the people in your ecosystem. And I'm sure all of you in your ecosystems can make a huge difference as we move towards trying to make this world a better place than what it already is.
Absolutely. And I think we should all work together. And I can go on with so many more things that I want to know about,
Jaya, can I ask one
maybe,
question to doctor?
yeah,
One
sure,
question.
Sanjay.
Sure, sure.
Thank you, Doctor.
Sure,
Thank you very much. First of all, thought-provoking learning for us, Doctor. Frankly speaking, we don't even know how many different cancers are there, and how do you minimize the impact of chemotherapy? Because I have seen some very drastic, side effects, and people go through a very huge tension there. Please guide us on this. And we don't even know how many cancers are there. When we get to know, we come to know that, oh, this is also one more cancer.
Yeah, so, I'll give you an answer. Even I don't know how many cancers are there. So,
Okay.
I'll give you a simple answer for a difficult question. Now,
Okay.
broadly speaking, let's say that there are solid cancers, which means the tumors, and there are the
Right.
liquid cancers, which are the blood or the lymphatic system cancers. So if you broadly want to understand, the leukemias, lymphomas, etc., are the liquid cancers, and the tumors of the stomach and the pancreas and breast cancer are solid tumors. I
Okay.
can't obviously take a detailed lecture about the various adenocarcinomas and sarcomas and lymphatic. So many things are there, which is beyond the
Right.
purview of this talk as of now. So that's one. Now, chemotherapy has made a lot of progress in the last 30, 40 years. Having said that, we clearly know that it also has side effects. Fortunately, we have started getting better and better medicines to mitigate those side effects or keep those side effects in control. There are too many drug interactions which happen when you give a chemotherapy. And as you know, the problem with chemotherapy is that it is also destroying the good normal cells in the body. So it doesn't only destroy the cancer cells, it also destroys the normal cells. And that's why the body takes such a hit, which is not easy. But sometimes the cancer is bad enough that we need to do this as a necessary evil. So I think a lot of this depends also on the kind of counseling that goes in. I can see a dear friend of mine from the UK, Dhananjay, who's there here, himself a high quality expert breast cancer surgeon from Edinburgh. And perhaps he might be able to tell you the kind of systems that are available around treating breast cancer to minimize the side effects of chemotherapy. But I think it's about counseling. It's about telling them about drug administration and dosing, trying to see what kind of medicines you give at what time to cut down the side effects like vomiting and other areas. People have serious disfigurement issues, loss of hair, etc. All this, if it is managed well to perfection, things can be reduced. Having said that, there are certain chemotherapies which are indeed horrendous for the initial part. But sometimes, again, as I said, if you don't give that chemotherapy, you lose the patient. And there we know that we do take the brunt of being the bad people, of giving horrible chemotherapy. And sometimes, of course, we will make patients question and ourselves also, is this worth it? Should we do it? The minute we realize that the benefit is clearly more than the risk that we give you, then at a human level, I feel convinced that we should do this. So again, I've given you a broad answer. For different chemotherapies, there are different drugs which can be given to minimize the effect. Some chemotherapies are better off with hospital admission. Some chemotherapies are fine on a daycare basis. So it's a vast topic which I can't cover. But maybe I can request Dhananjay. Do we have any time at all, Jaya?
Yeah, we can extend it, doctor. I was just concerned about your time, actually.
No, I'm just okay. Fortunately, things are quiet on the war front, and I will be after this getting home. But
Let's do it.
Maybe Dhananjay can add. I can see him. Dhananjay, beyond the doctor and the surgeon and the medical oncologist, the kind of nursing care, etc. You worked with us in Tata before. We are dear friends. Would you like to add anything more to what I said for this particular question about chemotherapy? Dhananjay, you need to unmute yourself. Yes.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you, Dhananjay. Good to
Yes.
see you.
Thanks, Shailesh. But I think you have covered everything what I would have otherwise said. And I completely acknowledge the side effects of chemotherapy. Even with the advances in supportive care, sometimes the side effects can be quite horrendous. But in addition to the medications, as you rightly pointed out, it is the supportive care which is quite important. And the supportive care means not only just medical personnel, it also comes from family, it also comes from loved ones, it also comes from various organizations, like we have a Maggie's Center in our hospital, which is a charitable foundation, and they provide a lot of psychological support. They also provide holistic care for the side effects. They have also started, interestingly, yoga classes for chemotherapy patients to reduce the side effects of chemotherapy. So all these things do help to go through the journey of chemotherapy. But I do agree with you that you have to weigh the advantages and the side effects of chemotherapy. And if the advantages far outweigh the side effects, then you have to take that decision and go with chemotherapy.
Thanks, Dhananjay. Thanks.
Fantastic.
Please.
Just one question, which can I ask? Shailesh?
आता question answer ते general विचारतात. Cricket.
Hello. Yeah, can I ask one question? Yeah. So one is I remember you saying that there are different types of cancers in the West, and in the India there is a different type of cancer which is prevalent. So can you shed some light on that? Can't hear him, Jaya.
I can't hear. Doctor, we can't hear you. You got muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
So, in India, the commoner cancers in the past was cervical cancer and stomach cancer related to socio-economic conditions. And it's just about basic hygiene and socio-economic conditions, which gave rise to things like lung cancer, cervical cancer, and stomach cancer. But now in recent years, what we get to see is that the incidence of cervical cancer is gradually going down, and this is a great sign. This means that in India, the socioeconomic structure as well as the education and concepts of hygiene have improved. And so cervical cancer, which is very uncommon in the West, is also definitely coming down. I've seen it come down dramatically in the last 20 years at the Tata Memorial. Which are the cancers which are on the upswing? We have breast cancer, which is in very large numbers now than ever before, a disease of the West. Cancers of the large intestine, colon and rectum, etc., are also cancers which are seen in urban India far more than rural India. But we see again a trend where the number of cancers that I used to see of the gastrointestinal tract were much less when I joined in 2002 as an assistant professor. I became the head of my specialty in 2010, and now I'm the head of cancer surgery. but we have seen more than a 300, if not 400% increase in gastrointestinal cancers in the last 10 years at the Tata Memorial. And gastrointestinal cancers are diseases of the West. We clearly believe that a combination of diet, obesity, lack of exercise, alcohol, and smoking are all contributing to some of these cancers showing a clear upswing. But my specialty, which is pancreatic cancer, just to give you an example of even colon and rectal cancer, in America or in the Far East, the numbers would be about 15 to 25 per 100,000 for these cancers. In India, it is just about 5 to 10 per 100,000, but it has increased the colon cancers. Pancreatic cancer is 12 per 100,000 in, say, UK or in Germany or in America. But in India, it is just about 3 to 4 per 100,000. So we still have pancreatic problems, which are only 1/3 of what you see in the West. But clearly, my own team over here, you know, when Dhananjay and I were here in Tata in 2002, etc., we used to do about 25 to 30 pancreatic operations a year. Now we do about 200 pancreatic operations a year, and we have a big wait list for the same. So the numbers have, in a snapshot to tell you, these cancers from the West are also making their inroads into India. Of course, part of it is also related to awareness as well as better diagnostics. But there is also an upswing, and that's why cancer is clearly more visible now, along with diabetes and hypertension in 2020 as compared to what it was at the turn of the century.
Thank you.
Great information. Doctor, we have one question from Payal Irani. I think Supriya, you're trying to ask a question, is it?
Yeah, correct.
Okay. Supriya, can I take Payal's question? She's asked it and it's been on the chat for quite some time.
Sure.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, thank you. So, Dr. Payal Irani says that what was the most challenging case you had come across in your career? If there is some insight you could give about something that was really challenging.
To technically describe to you is very difficult because if you don't have a medical background, it becomes difficult. But yes, not because I practice it, but I'm fully aware that some of the most complex operations involve something like pancreatic surgery. And I must say that it was a case of being partly caught out because despite all the adequate preparation before, you can run into a war zone, not because you create one, but because all the planning doesn't help you on the operation table. So this happened once in 2009. I think every case has a unique challenge and is different. And I say that's why that you're as good as your last operation. You can do great 100 operations and then you can have 2 bad cases, and all the 100 operations that you have done is already a distant memory. But in this particular operation, it was a man who had undergone surgery for a kidney cancer 6 years prior. And he was a senior man in New Delhi. And he now developed that kidney cancer coming into the pancreas. And there are certain critical blood vessels in that area which you need to preserve if you want to preserve life. Otherwise, people die. And we knew that we were planning to do something like removing that tumor and replacing that blood vessel, etc. This turned out to be far more difficult than what we anticipated. And the end result was that the surgery lasted for close to 18 hours. It started at 10 o'clock in the morning and it got over the next day morning. I had to take 3-4 breaks. I had to try and marshal my resources by keeping up the momentum. The patient was having enormous amount of bleeding. We had to try and somehow stay on, but I had a great anesthesia team which never transferred their anxiety and tension onto me. I was tense enough. As luck would have it, this man was quite a VIP, so there were a lot of people waiting outside for him and for his well-being. He also had some security people with him. Um, Remarkably, the operation did get over the next day morning, and I remember walking to the car park completely lost and dazed and wondering what went wrong and how did I land up in this situation. And then, of course, within 2-3 hours, I was back at the place of work, and he was in the ICU on the ventilator, and he had received an extremely complex operation of 3-4 organs being removed and things being reconstructed. He had received something like 40 units of blood transfused because he lost a lot of blood, and we had to make sure that. So we had great work from the blood bank, from the intensive care, from the sisters, from the works. So I thought we have lost the game. The family was counseled that we have done our best, but this was something which was too much. Amazingly, the man did remarkably well, completely turned around, and lived for another 5.5 years after that. Unfortunately, his cancer came back again. But this man was so grateful to what Tata Memorial did, and he and his wife, they both saw, along with his children, he had 2 daughters, they saw what he did. And this man actually played a very key role in enhancing Tata Memorial's capabilities to train more people. He was aghast that with this kind of quality of work, he clearly wanted the Medical Council of India to take more interest in Tata Memorial. He said, when they are so good, they should be training far more people than what they are. So I do take some credit for the fact that for this gentleman's operation, Tata Memorial's training programs completely went on to a completely different level, what it was pre-2009 and post-2010. I think that was a bad, difficult innings, which finally had a good end. That's all that I can say.
Okay, great. I hope, Payal, you got your answer. And now, yes, Supriya, I'm really sorry. Please go ahead with your question. Thank you so much for letting me in.
Doctor, good evening. I just want to know whether the cancer is hereditary. Can you throw some light on that?
Yeah, so cancers can be hereditary and they can run in families. We know this well. So whenever we see any patient of cancer, we always make it a point to ask them whether they have a family history of cancer. And if they have a family history of cancer, we also have a genetic clinic where a detailed history of all these people, not just the patient, but their relatives, their siblings, is taken. Because sometimes you might find some genetic alterations or mutations within families, which might help us to alert the other family members that you may run the risk of developing certain cancers and what precautionary measures you can take. So is cancer hereditary? It can be hereditary, is my answer. But the vast majority of them are not hereditary. The problem happens at the level of the genes, but not necessarily those bad genes get transmitted from one generation to the other. But in about 10 to little more than 10% of cases, it can be hereditary.
Okay, thank you.
Doctor,
Thank
I have
you
a
so much.
tempting question, an interesting question. Is there any R&D or research on vaccine or even any kind of no relapsing? Is there any kind of study or R&D you have seen? Because, is there any vaccine R&D happened? Because now, there is a new vaccine which is going to be for the COVID. Because since, stature of your doctors and these fraternities worldwide, is there any innovation on that part?
So there is huge amount of innovation and efforts which have already gone in for looking at immunotherapy as a concept even in cancers.
Okay.
People have isolated things. People have looked at virus as a vector to try and treat cancers. Unfortunately, as we like to call it, there is a big gap between the bench and the bedside. So has there been some promising work which has already been done in the lab? The usual story is that of a pyramid. And I've myself worked with my own hands in the lab 2 decades ago now. So you can do phenomenal amount of work with great attention to detail in the lab, and you can reproduce a lot of results when it comes to working on cell lines or cell cultures and certain indirect ways to give you an idea that you might be onto treating a cancer or detecting a altered pathway or a mutation very well. This happens at the lab level. The minute those results are reproducible and more consistent, you think about taking it to the animal level, and then you try to replicate those results in the animal level. But already the pyramid starts to come down like this. So when you come to the animal experiments, in case you get successful, then it goes to the stage of phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3 trials. So the transition from what you think is the grandest idea in the world to the idea that finally reaches the human being for a trial, the denominator is too massive. I don't want to sound negative, but it is obviously not an easy solution to quickly find an answer for so many diverse cancers where different opposing mechanisms are present in the same cancer. So, you know, if I start telling you just what pancreatic cancer is, it's one of the most heterogeneous cancers with the largest number of gene mutations, with pathways which are tumor suppressing pathways, as well as tumor supporting or tumor growing pathways. And there is a clash, and these are very smart. This is like sleeper terror cells. You try to attack one pathway and the terrorist will go from some other pathway and still get there. So it's not easy. What you say is being done and people are doing it, but we still haven't got to that level of success where we say that this has happened and now it's going to be easy. The day those kinds of things truly happen, I think cancer care will take a quantum leap, but we are still not there as yet.
Great. Sanjay, I hope that has answered your question. Can we take another question too, Doctor? I can see a hand raised. Okay, let's take a last question in that case. Mahendraji, maybe you could ask whatever it is that you are wanting to.
Hello.
Yeah. Hello, Dr. Shaileshji, Mahendra Kapadia from Brahma Kumaris, Borivali. How are you, sir?
I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, fine. It was a very interesting talk and quite a good realization that the Western habits are most likely affecting our health. I think it's appearing like that possibly. Right. Now, yeah. I thought if you could also guide all of us on the benefits of spirituality. I know your interest in spirituality. So how far we can, all of the people can get benefited by the spiritual practice. So a little bit, if you can guide all of us.
Well, I don't know because I don't know whether I myself am on any form of a spiritual journey or not. I don't know. I think this is something which is an ongoing process. And sometimes you do some things and you are on a path and you discover that, oh, this is apparently the path towards spirituality. I don't look at spirituality as a defined exercise, and I don't put it in a separate silo and say that now I am at surgery and now I'm playing cricket and now let me read and do some spirituality. I can't. I think what's important is you need to integrate all the good things in life. You need to put it into practice day in and day out in every small activity that you do, professional or non-professional. I think the minute you start doing that, perhaps you stumble upon, I use the word stumble upon, concepts of spirituality, evolution, some sort of inward journey, etc. But I really feel I'm not qualified to talk about it. I'm enjoying the concept of becoming more and more aware of how humble one needs to be. The more surgeries I do, the more I grow, the more confident I get, the more humble I become, is the feeling I'm getting at this stage of my career. But I think what my father has always said, that I think it's very important to be first a good human being. And first a good human being and the rest will follow. So I think the key is to make sure that in every simple act that you do, there should be a touch of excellence. And in every act that you do, you should be simple and you should be genuine. I'm saying this because I don't want to use these words by telling you that this is a strategy. These are not strategies. This is not a strategy to impress you or make you happy or try to tell you how good or bad I am. I think you need to feel it within. And if you feel it within, you should live it. And if you live it, I think people around you get to sense it without you having to even say anything about it. So this is what I would say is spirituality. I think leading a good life, having a calm mind, having a positive mind, having a transparent mind and a good heart all goes together when it comes to spirituality. And it also helps you physically, mentally, and professionally. That's what I would say.
So Mahendraji, I think I muted you.
Yeah, 1 minute. Can I ask the question, please?
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Shailesh. It is excellent. Good
Jaya?
to know.
Yes,
I want to
Mr.
ask two questions, please. So,
Yes.
Doctor Sir, I am Menon here. I want to ask regarding the one is that prostate cancer. Even after the post-operation, whether a person will have chances of getting cancer. Second is pancreatic cancer. Pancreatic cancer, especially with the high level of diabetes, chances of getting cancer are there or remote?
Yeah, no, I think you have the risk. First question is about prostate cancer. Can you get it even after an operation? You can. And any cancer, almost the vast majority of cancers have the ability to come back as well, unless you have detected it truly at a very early stage and it has been completely treated well. That's why we cancer specialists prefer to talk about 5-year survival rather than just straight away telling you that it's a cure, unless it's a very early stage of cancer. And there are some cancers where we do tell them that you are cured for life. So is prostate cancer amongst the better cancers? Yes. It's a cancer which happens in men, you know that, and it usually will happen as one gets older. But it's a better cancer where there are multiple treatment modalities available. So to cut the long story short, even after an operation, you can get it. But there are ways to treat it even if it comes back again after an operation. And there are ways by medicines and by other forms of treatment that one can keep it in check and give you a long life, and not just a length of life, but a good quality of life. That's my first answer to your first question. Your second question is about diabetes and pancreas cancer. This is like the chicken and the egg. So there is enormous amount of research which tells you that diabetes is a precursor or something which can result in development of pancreas cancer. And this is true. And the other part, that perhaps you develop diabetes because you have pancreas cancer, is also true. So I don't want every diabetic in this audience to start getting scared. There are enough people and friends I have who are sportsmen and who are active doctors who can be diabetics. And it's not, as I said, cancer is an uncommon event in life. So well-controlled diabetes should not be a source of concern for you at all. You should carry on with your normal life. On the other hand, if you have a family history of, say, pancreatic cancer and you develop diabetes and things like that, in addition to being a diabetes specialist, it's also good to discuss these issues with your diabetes specialist or with an oncologist. But otherwise, I won't tell anyone on this audience to get too paranoid about diabetes. So now that I have diabetes, I have a very high chance of developing pancreas cancer. No, I don't want to send that message at this stage.
Mr. Menon,
yes.
Thank you. So thank you. I will refrain anybody now to ask question unless you want to, because we can go on, doctor, for another 1.5 hours. We are very happy to listen.
Jaya, just one thing. I just would like Shailesh to say some parting words about how we should take care of COVID, because that's so just his parting words for some guidance to us on how to be more immune or be more healthy or prevent that? And what does he feel about? Because there's a lot of rumors going around that this is airborne or not, or regarding the safety. I think he covered it briefly in his initially, but just some concluding it, and I think we should end after this.
Yeah, so I think as much as possible, we need to understand that everyone is looking at life before Corona and everyone wants to look at life after Corona. But we are not willing to spend enough time and invest our time and energy and our brains to see how we want to function with Corona. Because, I always say we should hope for the best, but be prepared for the worst. So it can also happen that we may have to live with Corona for the next 12 months or so. You may not necessarily get the vaccine that you're looking for. You might not be able to quickly get that quick fix silver bullet to solve the problem. And then we need to see how we want to live with this Corona. So I think 3 things again, which I mentioned, are the most important things. And if you really stick to these 3 things, you should not worry too much as possible in the social distance principle. Whenever you are in vicinity of people, it is very safe to have a mask which is fitting your nose and your mouth well. It's also important that if you are talking or interacting with people, to ensure that the person with whom you are interacting or talking is also wearing a mask. If they are not, you can be absolutely polite and right and justified in telling them that they need to wear a mask. I tell that to my patients when they come to the clinic now. If anyone comes with a mask which is below the nose or not wearing one, I do not allow. In Tata Hospital, previously, while seeing a patient, normally at least 2 relatives would come in. I clearly made it obvious that only 1 relative will be allowed to be with the patient. We need to create social distancing. But it's a form of discipline. It's nothing else. It's not being inhuman. It's done in the interest of the patient, and it's also done in my interest. So that's one thing where even when you meet socially with friends or whatever, you will have to at office, etc., make sure your mask is there. The third thing is, be careful about touching your hands anywhere. I'm in my office just now. I've got sanitizers. I've washed my hands. That's why you have seen me do this, but otherwise you will not see me. Wearing gloves is an overdoing thing. You don't need to wear gloves. You just take care that your hands have to be respected, and with military discipline, every now and then for no reason, just keep your hands clean with soap and water. And anything that you want to touch, whether it's a pen, whether it's a telephone, whether it's a piece of paper, think twice, do you really need to touch it? And if you have to touch it, and if it is not something which is from your home, make sure that you wash your hands, but don't get paranoid about it. I've already been reading a newspaper at home for more than 6 weeks now, no problem. But just take care. After handling the newspapers, I'm not rubbing my eyes with it, for heaven's sake. This is about discipline and trying to take care. As regards immunity, I think we all know that we need good amount of protein in our diet. Whatever your diet, focus on protein, 1. 2, a dry throat is not something which is ideal, and it's a nice ground for this virus to make inroads. That doesn't mean you keep on drinking water all the time, but some people might be used to keeping their mouth open and sleeping, say, in an air-conditioned environment. Be a little bit careful, that's 1. 2, it's good to gargle with warm or hot water twice in a day. These are simple home remedies, and these are things which we learned with our grandmothers. Those who are born in the 60s and 70s, I'm telling you, nothing new. All the grandmothers' remedies: shoes out of the house first, washing your hands and feet before you go to the dining table, changing clothes because you are out the whole day, and then coming on the dining table or having a shower, before touching children, before touching, hugging old people. Just do these basics well. If you do this, if you gargle twice a day, if you maintain mouth hygiene, hand hygiene, take a high protein diet, take a fair degree of vitamin C or citrus fruits like lime juice, etc., you will take care of your immunity in a reasonable way, and then you will be fine. Now, after this, you want to still go for a movie, you are inviting trouble. I'm sorry. If you want to do that, then it's bad. Yes, for those who travel by local trains, I have a sense of concern. But the gradual unlocking that is ongoing anyway is gradually going to ensure that this virus is going to be there more and more. So people are paranoid constantly about the increasing numbers. I'm absolutely sure that these numbers are going to grow more. But do not lose your sleep over it. Absolutely do not lose your sleep over it. What we want to do is to convert this disease into a chronic disease. Remember that 70% people, if not 75% people, won't even realize that they have the disease. That's the dangerous part of this disease, but they won't have a major problem with this disease. Another 20% will get what we call is flu, a sore throat, my throat was aching, a little upper respiratory tract infection, body ache, don't feel like working, maybe I have some flu, and that makes it 95%. It's only those 5% which can run a more severe form, and then you will have people who might need to rush to the hospital requiring oxygen and then finally a ventilator. And then, you will get about 30 to 40% of people on a ventilator who may not make it. The problem in this country is that we are 130 crores. And that's the reason our mortalities, our numbers will always appear a lot. But if you look at what has happened in America, if you look at what has happened in Spain, in Italy, these are countries with the best healthcare systems. Italian healthcare system is, I think, perhaps the second best healthcare system in the world. And those systems got overwhelmed because they ignored the basics. In that sense, I think we must compliment our governments for taking proactive and big steps. It's easy to criticize that why did we take such a big step on the 23rd of March? We could have taken that big step a few days later, but nobody knows about this disease. So in the circumstances, given the fact that Mumbai is one of the most populous cities in the world, with a population density which is very similar to Sao Paulo, if not worse than Sao Paulo, it's difficult but to do a lockdown. That was the best thing to do to safeguard people. What's going to happen is the healthcare systems which are there are not going to get overwhelmed. So we will gradually make this disease into a chronic disease by just some patients. So I would say, and I would urge my colleagues and friends, I hope I'm proven wrong, and I hope we get the wonder vaccine. I'm waiting for it. I want to get back on a cricket ground myself. I want to do everything that you all want to do. But I would say that if we just lie low with discipline and actually revisit the basics which we had kind of lost touch with, Mother Nature and God is actually teaching us a tough lesson. So it is wartime, but it is not a real war. So just follow the basics. And I think in a year from now, we would all be relieved, grateful, wiser, and stronger, and not get worried about it. We don't need to get so paranoid and worried. And stop reading. Once in a week, you can read about what's happening to the numbers and who is contained and who is not and what's happening. But the rest of the time, it's time to start utilizing your time well. Wherever you are, in whatever circumstances you are, your health will get better and you will be better. So that's my message. Don't be so worried about it. I'm absolutely sure the kind of surgical results that we have produced in the last 3 months is testimony to the fact that a large part of life is with care, with control, with some luck, but it's going on well, convincingly. And that's very important for you to know that we will get there and we'll get better.
Right. Wow. Thank you so much, Doctor. I cannot tell you how thankful we are that you came here and you have really given us some great insights about COVID. There is one thing that I would like to add here, and that is my complete belief in wherever our focus goes is where our energy flows. So, instead of worrying about COVID and all, if we listen to what you just said, and if we focus on how we can create immunity for ourselves, how we can create a discipline, how we can, take care of small things around us, washing hands, not touching our face, not touching other things and all of that, And the best thing which you mentioned was spirituality. So if instead of worrying about this, we give some time and focus on, getting stronger within ourselves, I think the outside will be taken care. Correct me if I'm wrong, doctor.
I think I'm no guru here to correct anyone. I think we are all friends and colleagues and we learn from each other. I've shared with you. I think all that I'm trying to say is that we just need to utilize the time that we have of one beautiful life that we have to the best. It's all about optimization, no wasting of time. Do whatever you want to do, but try to do it perfectly with a touch of excellence. I'm not saying perfection. Perfection is, sometimes you run the risk of becoming a neurotic.
Correct.
I don't want to be perfect, but whatever I want to do, whether I want to wear a nice shirt, whether I want to enjoy a nice drink with Dhananjay in a nice pub, which I'm waiting for, but I don't know when. But I want to meet my other friends in Mumbai, Rajesh and Mangal and everyone. I think the key is whatever you do it well. So just now, God is telling us that it's not about going to a pub and meeting friends, but there are many other things for which we never found time. We always use that as an excuse because we were busy in our so-called life. Now God is saying, take it. I'm giving you the time that you always wanted. Have you found the time to utilize those 24 hours well? I think that's what we need to ask. Utilize it well, and perhaps we will all gradually in our own journeys become spiritual. I don't know how to define spirituality, to be honest. Maybe I will one day, but just now I really don't know what is spirituality.
Sorry, but from our group, Jaya, sorry to intervene.
With that note,
Hello, doctor. From our group, we just wanted to tell you one thing, just come from the bottom of our heart. It's like Dr. Dravid. You understand, calm, composed, and with so much of love for cricket, as well as so much of plethora of knowledge in terms of the depth. So thank you very much. This is from a group. Jaya will say thanks definitely, but it comes from us. And your face also looks like Dravid. Huh? Let me tell you that, because we are all at receiving end.
So, but talking about Dravid, I don't want to extend this too long now. But talking about Dravid, if you want to tell your kid, or if you want to tell someone to become a cricketer as a role model, it is not Sachin. I would say you should aim to be a Dravid, because Dravid is a made cricketer. He taught you many things which a genius like Sachin may not be able to teach. Sachin, I played a lot with him. So for me, he was magical. He was a test cricketer when he was in school, and I have experienced it firsthand. So Sachin is God. There is no question. He could bring a country to a standstill. But if you really want to learn the virtues of patience, of discipline, of commitment, of technique, of hard work, I think Dravid is a great role model. So talking about cricket again, since you said that, I extended the discussion a little bit more. I'm sorry for that.
No, please, doctor, please feel free. And thank you so very, very, very much for coming with us today, sharing so many things that are going to be really a treasure for us. And thank you everybody who's been here with us for we didn't. Yes, doctor, please.
I have to share something because I saw someone just now, and I'm sure he won't mind it. And this guy is a guy called Nitesh Kurtadkar. You can see that guy on the screen somewhere. And, I will now tell you, Nitesh, do I have the permission to talk?
You must be on mute.
Nitesh, you're on mute.
Yes,
Nitesh, bolu, tujabaddal bolu?
Sir, definitely, sir.
Okay. So Nitesh Kurtadkar is he's an employee with us in Tata Hospital, and he's an OT boy who has come back after being positive.
Oh,
he has fully recovered. He's a very good cricketer. I've taken him to South Africa. We've had a match-winning partnership in Cape Town at the Western Province Cricket Club of more than 100 runs to win against a top team there. And we play cricket together. He's a young guy. I'm twice his age, if not more. But the good thing about the Tata work culture is that he's now helping us in robotic surgery and everything right in the OT complex of Tata. But he has recovered fully. And this is an example of what Tata has done, that the desire to come back to work even after being COVID positive, recovering, we took care of them. He took care of himself. I was in touch with them. We are one big family at the Tata Memorial. I happened to see him, so I wanted to give you the confidence that people have had that illness. There is no stigma. He is back at work, and now he's taking interest in listening to his boss, unfortunately. Nitesh, you should enjoy life on a Friday evening, not be with me.
Sorry, sir. And thank you, sir.
Fine.
Great. So good. We get to meet another colleague from Tata. And I must tell you, Doctor, I started my career with Tata Teleservices and I worked there for about 4.5 years. Now, this is about 20 years back, but yes.
Lovely.
So thank you so much for being here with us. Thank you, everybody. And I know that, it just doesn't feel like going away. We still want to be here, chit chat, have some more fun. But maybe we should have another program sometime with Doctor again. And all of us here. Yes. So thank you so much. With a
Thank you,
hope
Dr.
that
Srikanth. Thank you. Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you, Abhijit. Thank you, Jaya. And thank you, everyone.
you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Srikanth.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you so
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Abhijit, for sending me the link. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, yeah, it was very good session. Thanks.
Thank you. I'm so glad. Thank you, Doctor. Thanks, Abhijit.
Yeah,
Thank you, Supriya.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody. Let's keep connected.